If the conflict gets bigger, the U.S. will suffer significant damages. Here's President Biden on whether he's considering sending troops to Israel. Watch this.
I don't think that's necessary. Israel has one of the finest fighting forces in the country.
Would you support Israeli occupation of Gaza at this point?
I think it'd be a big mistake. Look, what happened in Gaza, in my view, is Hamas and the extreme elements of Hamas don't represent all the Palestinian people.
Do you believe that Hamas must be eliminated entirely?
Yes, I do. But there needs to be a Palestinian Authority.
Senator, your thoughts on the president's comments on that 60 Minutes interview?
You know, Maria, President Biden is managing the conflict there in Israel and Gaza the same way he's managing our southern border. It's a disaster. He should be up on his facts. Israel's already said they're not going to occupy Gaza. He ought to understand this too. Iran would not be in a position to make the threats that they're making were it not for the appeasement strategy that he's engaged in since he came into office. We saw this unfold under the Obama administration. Appeasement brought about the violence that we saw in Gaza in 2014, 2015, the disastrous Iran deal, the JCPOA that they brought forward. Thankfully, President Trump tore that up. We went to maximum pressure. Maximum pressure was working. We ought to impose every sanction that we possibly can right now. Instead, Joe Biden is talking about, well, potentially pausing the payment of $6 billion while he's looked the other way in terms of sanctions enforcement and allow Iran to enrich itself to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. That enrichment, that non-enforcement of sanctions, has allowed Iran to support proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah and deliver the type of wrath that they've delivered to Israel right now. This is the biggest loss of Israeli and Jewish lives that we've seen since the Holocaust.
Do you have a confidence that, in fact, Israel can wipe out Hamas?
I absolutely do. They have a very competent military. We've been very effective in terms of working with them. I think what we need to do is step back, give Israel the headroom, and allow them to do what they need to do and give them the moral support to do that. It took Joe Biden 48 hours to get around to the fact of acknowledging this.
Yeah, well, look at all the threats, though, that we're having faced with from Iran. And I also want to point out that Trey Yingst is standing by. He reported earlier that the Israeli military told him 199 hostages are being held in Hamas in Gaza, by Hamas in Gaza, rather. 14 of those hostages are believed to be Americans. Stay with us, Bill Haggerty, because I want to get to foreign correspondent Trey Yingst. He's on the ground right now in southern Israel. Trey.
Yeah, Maria, good morning. We are at an Israeli artillery position in southern Israel. We're the only team here watching soldiers as they train and prepare to get ready for the days to come. There's a real understanding that the ground invasion could be just a matter of hours away, and Israel has to be prepared for what comes next. Now, we just spoke with someone who is a major in the Israeli military to get more information about the latest on the ground, and he said the Israelis have thwarted 3 cross-border attempts overnight. Also, they are trying to evacuate the northern part of their country along the border with Lebanon, 28 different communities, because they're worried about Hezbollah trying to attack from the north. And the situation on the ground in Gaza is deteriorating. Hamas, the group in control of Gaza, continues to fire rockets into southern and central Israel. And the military, on the record, speaking with Fox, says there is no ceasefire, despite reports earlier today that indicated there would be a ceasefire in the southern part of Gaza to allow for the evacuation of foreigners from the Strip and the entry of aid. So a lot of developments on the ground, but the soldiers behind me in high spirits. They say they are prepared for any sort of continued attacks against Israel, but they're understanding that a multi-front conflict is in the cards here, and it's something they have to be ready to go.
Well, I mean, Trey, Israel could not have been more clear. Not only did they warn Hamas that they are coming in to retaliate against those attacks, the worst attacks since September 11th, but they also flew planes over Gaza and dropped leaflets. And on those leaflets, they told the citizens, get out of Dodge. So, I mean, they're being real transparent here.
Yeah, absolutely. We had some original reporting last week. I spoke with a diplomatic source over the weekend who indicated that inside Gaza, when the Israelis warn civilians about an airstrike that's about to take place against their building, they are keeping civilians from leaving their homes. And I spoke with someone inside Gaza City who confirmed this information. And then I reached out to Hamas, who on the record denied that this was taking place. But then the Israelis, as it relates to the broader evacuation, released drone images of roadblocks that Hamas set up inside the Gaza Strip. And so we've started to report this out more and try to understand what exactly is happening inside Gaza. Well, this morning I received a text message from a source in Gaza City, a civilian, who said they have gotten out of their cars and they're now walking south because they're no longer able to drive. There are traffic jams on the two main routes headed south, and they understand that the Israeli ground operation could start at any moment, so they need to get out of the way. So this source sending me a video and a few photos of he and his family walking south. That's how desperate they are to get out of harm's way in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip.
And Trey, the video that you exposed showed actual Hamas fighters as they began that attack on Israel from last Saturday, right? You got your hands on some GoPro video where we could see very clearly Hamas terrorists snatching people, going into Israel, going into people's homes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also learning more information from the military about the planning from Hamas. And these militants that crossed in, these terrorists who killed women and children in their homes. So we learned two things over the past 24 hours. One, the Israeli military, they found leaflets and they found pamphlets, all sorts of information that Hamas fighters had tucked in their bulletproof vests that they wore into Israel that give maps of the area and also what communities to hit, even giving phrases of what to say in Hebrew, transliterated to tell people we're taking you hostage or we've killed your family. Additionally, we are learning more about the weapons that they used. They even used a thermobaric bomb that was homemade inside Gaza, throwing it into a civilian home and exploding, killing many civilians in the area. Maria?
Unbelievable. Wow. Trey, thank you so much. Incredible reporting from you. Trey Yingst on the ground this morning in Israel. Thank you, Trey Yingst. Stay safe. I'm talking with Senator Bill Hagerty this morning from Tennessee. Senator, you just heard Trey's report. Give us your reaction. And also, I want to know from you, where did Hamas get these weapons?
Well, first I'd like to say I appreciate the bravery and courage that Trey has demonstrated. His reporting is absolutely critical. It's amazing what Hamas is doing. Their leadership should be called out on this, Maria. You know, the Israeli forces, the IDF, have called for civilians in Gaza to leave, to evacuate. Hamas leadership that are sitting in the comfort of five-star hotels in Qatar are telling their people to stay. They want to see the carnage. They want this to feed their propaganda machine. The blood is going to be on the hands of Hamas leadership. We need not allow the public to forget that, because there will be a massive propaganda machine underway as soon as the Israeli forces move on the ground in Gaza. Remember what Trey just told us. With respect to the weapons, I tell you, after what happened in Afghanistan, the Biden policy failures there, the evacuation of Afghanistan that left $80 billion worth of American equipment on the ground, I wouldn't be surprised that some of that equipment from the world's largest now arms bazaar doesn't make its way into this conflict, that our own equipment might find its way into the hands of these terrorists in Gaza.
Well, I mean, we know that the equipment was left on the ground. Where is it? In Afghanistan.
I have a feeling, I know where some of it might be. Exactly, we don't know. And again, that goes to the irresponsibility of this administration. They just look the other way, and all they do is spend rather than think about the strategy. With respect to Hamas, though, let's not forget the fact that Hamas is funded by Iran. During the Trump administration, we executed the maximum pressure campaign that choked off the flow of funds to Iran. We took the flow of funds down to a trickle. They weren't allowed to sell their oil on the black market. In fact, Hamas and Hezbollah were going broke. That was widely reported in the media. Joe Biden comes back into business. You know, in 2021, what do we see? The 11-day war coming from Gaza. Now we've got this. Anybody that believes that these funds, this technology, and this know-how isn't coming from Iran needs to wake up, Maria.
Well, I was just thinking that the other day. What about the maximum pressure campaign? They've obviously abandoned that in the Biden administration, and here's where we are. Senator, thank you. We'll be watching all of your work on this. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Maria. Great to be
Bill
with you.
Hagerty joining us this morning in Tennessee. We'll be right back.
Boy, oh boy, what a tangled web we do weave. You know, whenever Vice President Pence talked about mistakes has been made, I don't think he had a clue in just exactly how many mistakes have been made.
about coming into 2023, a number of economists were calling for a recession this year. Never materialized. The consumer has been quite strong. And part of the reason, Maria, that the consumer has been quite strong is wage increases have been very material in 2023. There's a shortage of labor. You see that in the monthly JOLTS numbers, job openings and labor turnover numbers. And because of that, the wages continue to rise, which is a challenge for the Fed when it comes to fighting inflation. But the point is that the consumer is in good shape. Now, don't get us wrong. There are some consumers, the lower FICO score consumers, that are starting to struggle coming out of the pandemic. But overall, the consumer is in good shape. The debt service, how much they pay every month as a percentage of disposable income, is quite low relative to where it was prior to the financial crisis. So the consumer is, I think, surprising people to the upside.
So, I mean, what does this all mean for the Fed? We're looking at the...
And he may very well be right, because right now, you know, I said if this war breaks out, it's going to affect the gas prices, in which it has. But I was talking about affecting them in a negative way. And right now, gasoline has actually dropped a bit here in the state of Tennessee anyway, of basically using reverse psychology. I guess the only thing I can think of, but I guarantee you, whenever they go to blowing up them oil wells and them oil fields over there, you will see this totally turn around to the degree of oil going out of sight before long. And it's really sad, because it's a massive confusion right now going on all fronts, that of course we know who the author of that confusion is, if you know anything about the Bible.
By the cooking shows. So it's part of, you know, doing more with their content.
Yeah, interesting pivot to get more revenue in ways that connect to the content. Laura, thank you. We are following breaking news this morning out of the Middle East. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is back in Israel today. He's currently meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. Netanyahu has vowed to, quote, demolish Hamas. Iran's foreign minister, however, reportedly warning that an Israeli ground offensive in Gaza would force Tehran to intervene.
I said that prices would rise. I didn't say when that they would rise. I hardly ever put a date on anything that I put out there to the public in exchange towards either a forecast or a prediction. But right now, as of right now today, within a week into this war, we have seen gas prices in the state of Tennessee go down probably about 25 cents to the gallon in this particular area, which to me is using reverse psychology, because I was the one that pointed out that all the oil petroleum tycoons needed to go to jail, pertaining to how that they hiked all the prices up and basically put the world off into a state of depression or recession, whatever you want to call it. And now they're going in the opposite direction, because they know that we the people are on to them. But like I said a while ago, if the war expands and it elevates in the degree that they start blowing up oil fields, you will see a major difference in the prices. I don't know how major, I don't know when, but I'm just saying that if this thing continues on the road that it's on right now, it could be substantial.
He also says Hezbollah has considered all their scenarios of the war, and any step it takes will, quote, cause a huge, quote, earthquake in the Zionist entity. Joining me right now is former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker. Kurt, thanks very much for being here. What do you make of Iran's warning and threat to Israel to not go forward with a ground offensive?
Yeah, well, I think Iran must be aware that, first off, Israel is going to do this. Israel needs to do this to assure its own security in the future. It can't live with Hamas running a mini statelet right next door. And secondly, I think Iran must also know that Israel holds Iran responsible for these attacks and may indeed engage in attacks against Iran directly. So Iran is trying to preempt by deterring Israel from taking these steps, which I don't think is going to work.
Well, we've heard reports that Hezbollah has at least 100,000 rockets, Kurt. Your thought on the capability of Hezbollah, should Israel go in a broad offensive in retaliation to all of those attacks that Hamas brought a week ago? Does Hezbollah get involved even further?
Well, I think that is the most likely scenario in the short term. Israel goes into Gaza, it does try to clean out Hamas, and Hezbollah responds to that by attacking Israel with rockets. Israel, I believe, has the capability to respond to to Hezbollah as well. And I think to deter them from an all-out attack against Israel. I don't think Hezbollah really wants to have a new war with Israel. I think they do want to show solidarity with Hamas and respond, but they may act with some restraint.
Well,
I did want to bring out the fact that Biden, whenever he went to some sort of a world meeting, I think it was on the last holiday, Memorial. No, it was on Labor Day, Labor Day, just recently. He stopped off in Alaska, and some reporter asked him, then again, it may have been September 11th. I think it was September 11th. It was September the 11th, whenever Biden was on some sort of a international meeting. He come back to Alaska to be able to be on American grounds, and some reporter asked him if